and it's going to YouTube. Yep, I see it on Twitter.
So we're good to go?
Yeah, it's a little slow on Facebook, but it'll get there. Going to YouTube.
Yep. You see it on Facebook, Travis?
It's on Twitter.
Yeah, I see it on Twitter. Facebook is usually a little slow. I don't know why.
We'll give it a couple minutes or a second or so.
All right, yeah, let me refresh and see.
Everybody retweet that real quick.
It's on YouTube also. So worst case, Brad, I can just share a link to Twitter or YouTube or something.
Yeah, that makes sense. I would put all three in a comment, and that they'll have their choice.
All right. Well, yeah, y'all are ready. Whenever y'all are ready, have a good show. I'm gonna dip out.
Thanks, Larry.
See you.
All right, welcome everybody. Welcome to the LPNC 24 candidate review. Tonight, I've got an all-studded review here with Brad, Ed, and Travis. So tonight, we're gonna talk about some of the various challenges and things that we've got going on. First, let me introduce I'll introduce myself. My name is Shannon Bray. I am the current candidate for Lieutenant Governor for the state of North Carolina for the Libertarian Party. And starting off with who I see in my top left, Brad, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. My name is Brad Hessel. I am the Libertarian and Forward Party candidate for Senate 18, which is Northern Wake County and Granville County. And I've got a Democratic and a Republican opponent. I'm in one of the two districts. Wake County, of course, has 19 North Carolina General Assembly districts, more than any other county. Well, we're tied with Mecklenburg, which makes sense because we have the most people. And this is one of two districts that's really competitive. So between them, my opponents and their various PACs that support them and the parties are spending, could be $2 billion by the time it's all said and done. It's definitely over $1 million. And this for, a job that pays $14,000. So you can tell that they really, really want this Senate seat. So I don't expect to get a whole lot of votes, but I'm hoping that however many I get, it's more than the difference between the two of them.
That's an outstanding goal all the way across the board. Ed, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
So my name's Ed George. I'm running for House 34, which basically is from Peace Street north between Capitol Boulevard and Creedmoor Road in Raleigh. A little bit about my background. I grew up in Appalachia in West Virginia. As a poor kid before we had a U.S. Department of Education. So I went to a school system that didn't have that influence other than some special education programs that existed at the time. And grew up with very independent attitudes, as many Appalachians can have, right? We don't like people to be in our way, and we don't like to be told what to do. We certainly didn't like the government involved in our lives. So we took a lot more of a pride over what we did on our own versus what the government did for us. And really believed in the philosophies of that's not what the country can do for you, but what can you do for your country? So as I said, I was a poor family. I put myself through college, went to engineering school. And after many years of career development, doing different things, I've now been in North Carolina about 27 years, in Cary and in Raleigh for all that time. And I now manage very large capital construction projects for a lot of the local large biopharmaceutical companies. And so I'm really proud of the accomplishments I've come from, where I come from and what I do today. I'm a huge fan of Thomas Jefferson. Two of his quotes are two of my favorite things to say. And that's the purpose of government is to prevent men from harming one another. And if my neighbor has, I don't care if my neighbor has 1 or 50 gods, as long as he hasn't broken my leg nor taken money from my pocket, his affairs are his own. And I think that the extent of government should end at about those two statements. So I'm really excited about running for office in North Carolina. I ran in West Virginia once and won in a city council election. It was a lot of fun many years ago. And currently I'm running against incumbent Tim Longus, Democrat, and there's no Republican in the race. So I'm pretty excited about trying to get at least noticed with hopefully a reasonable number of votes, if not a competitive situation.
Yeah, that's exciting. It's very nice when we can get a libertarian in a two-party race.
Yeah.
So we're really kind of pulling for you there, especially with the Republican turnout so far this year.
Yeah.
Travis, why don't you tell us about yourself a little bit?
Well, thanks for doing this, by the way. And my name is Travis Groo. I am running for House 36, which pretty much encompasses Holly Springs, Apex, a little bit of Garner, and a little bit of Fuquay-Varina. And I'm running to give voters another choice from the uniparty that seems to be not resonating with over half of the voters in North Carolina. And it's not my first time running. I'm hoping to at least split the difference of the two. I'm running against two ladies. And so I'm the only guy in the race. And I'm running back-to-back campaigns. I just ran for city council, so I jumped right into this House 36 race. So I've been campaigning for probably a year and a half now, and it's getting to where it's exhausting. It's tiring, but it's worth it because as pretty much I echo what everyone says. I believe the role of government should be so small you can barely see it. It should be so tiny that we don't even realize who's in office, nor does it even really matter because the government's out of your life, out of your pocketbook, out of your love life, out of your house, off your property. And basically, you govern yourself. That's the way it should be. That's the way the founders designed this country, how this country to run with the Constitution. And boy, have we drifted from it. So I'm here to bring some sanity and some more individualism back into our culture and our society and to kick the government out as much as possible.
Oh, I always like that. And I want to commend you on running back-to-back campaigns. I know how exhausting that can be. So that's a great service, both to the party and to the state. So let's start talking about some of our personal experiences. Brad, why don't you tell me what your views on government are and what's kind of been your experiences on some of your public policy?
Well, I guess, when I was growing up, my parents were big on don't hit people and don't steal their stuff, right? That's what my father always was big on, the exception of if somebody hits you first. He was big on, don't hit anybody first, but be the one that hits them last, right? So, I guess that's kind of always been a libertarian. Of course, I didn't realize it. I started out as a Peace Democrat working for George McGovern. And, I was one of 3 people in the United States to vote for George McGovern in 1972. I think he won Massachusetts and Washington, D.C., and that's it. And Nixon won everything else. And, I worked for McGovern. Then it took me, I don't know, like 10, 12 years to get completely fed up with the Democratic Party. They were just so full of, first of all, they were incredibly profligate in their spending. And then on top of that, they had this toxic identity politics thing where they were dividing everybody into, different groups, left-handed Puerto Rican homosexuals or whatever. And they had, the 84 convention, they had all these quotas for these different groups. So, like 15 and a half delegates had to be this kind of flavor. And I finally got fed up, and by that time, Ronald Reagan was in power. I had not voted for him in 1980, but he was talking a good game about fiscal responsibility, and that appealed to me. I was, older and paying taxes and kind of a little bit more aware of financial stuff, and so I switched to being a Republican, and I did vote for Reagan in '84, and then of course. The Republicans get into power and the deficit goes up even more than when the Democrats are in power, right? I mean, they talk a good game. They don't actually deliver, right? But I was raising kids and working, and then we moved to North Carolina in the midst of this in 1992. And so I was pretty distracted and really not very active in politics. So I just stuck with the Republicans kind of out of inertia. until the turn of the century. And then under George W. Bush, we invaded Afghanistan and Iraq. I mean, Afghanistan, are you kidding me? I mean, the British were there and they couldn't do anything with it. And the Russians were there and they couldn't do anything with it. It's not even a real country. It's just a bunch of tribes, right? I mean, the idea of going in and nation building in Afghanistan is just so ludicrous. And then we got into Iraq and we clearly didn't know what we were doing. I mean, within a week of taking the country over, we disbanded the army. So you suddenly have 250,000 guys, you know, who aren't getting paid anymore, who have guns. We had no plan for dealing with those guys. I mean, it was so bad, right? So I out of exasperation, I switched to being an independent at that point. And then 2007, pretty much the kids are, you know, out of the house now. And I'm, you know, I don't know, I was working, doing something, and I get a phone call from my brother-in-law. He's in Baltimore. Now, he is a true Democrat. He's not a socialist, but he's like, you know, just like a 2 degrees short of being a socialist, right? So he calls me up. Brad, you got to turn on the TV and watch the Republican presidential debates. This is 2007, mind you, right? Ralph, why are you even watching the Republican debates? And anyway, the election's not till next year. Brad, you got to turn it on. There's this guy, he's driving him crazy. So I turn on the TV, and there's Ron Paul, and he's trying to explain the concept of blowback, right, to Rudy Giuliani. You know, the concept that, you know, you poke a bear, and the bear's probably not going to be happy, and is probably going to swat at you, right, in connection with 9/11, right? And poor Rudy Giuliani, like on national TV, his head explodes, right? Oh my God, that's the craziest explanation of 9/11 I've ever heard. Take it back. You want Ron Paul to take it back. And, you know, all I knew about Ron Paul at that point was that he was the best baseball player in Congress who had not been a professional, and that he was an obstetrician in Texas. That's about as much as I knew about him. But when I started listening to Ron Paul, you know, he was talking about the Fed. He was talking about how government started out in the United States with 3 things, like we were supposed to, you know, provide for the common defense, supply a stable currency so we could all trade with one another and with everybody else, and protect individual rights. And the government did all those 3 things really well. But then we started piling on all these other functions that it wasn't designed to do and didn't do well. And now it doesn't even do the original 3 things well, right? This made so much sense. So I sent money to him for his 2008 campaign. And then in 2012, when he ran again, I worked for him. And the convention happened, and they wouldn't even let him speak, even though he had more, you know, delegates than anybody else except for Romney. And it was pretty natural after that debacle for me to just switch over, and with a lot of other people in North Carolina, by the way, and start working for Gary Johnson, who had started out that year as a Republican and then switched over to being the Libertarian candidate. And so I'm still independent at this point, but I was working for the Johnson campaign, and I even, you know, appeared on TV for them in that campaign. And I guess it was Jason Millahany was the manager of the campaign, and he introduced me to the Wake County Libertarian Party. So I went to my first meeting, and it was like, well, you know, we were in New York. We moved from Brooklyn to New York in '92, and my daughter, number 1, had started. I guess she was in first grade in Brooklyn, and you know, the school districts in New York are huge. There was 60,000 just in that district, and that was just one district in Brooklyn. 60,000 kids, right? So she got into the gifted and talented program, and you would walk into that classroom, and there's 25 kids, and it was like a science fiction movie. I mean, they were just. It was like. You could smell ozone. You could see the lightning going. I mean, these kids were so smart. It was intimidating, right? The Wake LP meeting was a little bit like that. There were these guys there that were just so, knowledgeable and had such a wide frame of reference. And plus, they would get into these discussions and argue about these arcane points that you didn't really understand why they were arguing. That kind of reminded me of the first grade class also, to be honest, right? But it was a very impressive experience. And then, my second meeting I ever went to was their annual meeting, and I got elected treasurer. They were so desperate because their treasurer was moving to Oakland that they I mean, I had experience, but I wasn't. Yeah, I think I had just changed my registration to Libertarian like 2 weeks before or something like that. So anyway, and that's how I got involved in the party. So I'm kind of a Ron Paul, Gary Johnson recruit. I don't know if that actually answers your question or not, but I've talked long enough, so I'm going to stop talking.
Sounds good. So Ed, why don't you tell us about your personal experiences that kind of helped shape your views on government and public policy a little bit?
Well, I commented a little bit about already on my background and my political hero, my life hero, maybe, Thomas Jefferson. And I'll make the story short to tag on to Brad's. Basically, when I saw a Ron Paul sign out along an exit ramp a few years back, it was just so comical that such a simple name was just on a sign in the middle of a field and nothing else around it. I thought, who the heck is this guy? And I studied a little bit and learned about Ron Paul and found out that he lived in his district was where I had a lot of friends that lived, and they all knew him. And so it was an interesting connection. I never actually met him, but I talked to a lot of them about him and learned a lot about more significant learning about the Constitution, about the things, I guess, that I always knew were in the Constitution, knew what the Constitution stood for, but felt very much that the world had just left it behind. It didn't matter anymore. And so I became much more interested in the Libertarian Party at that point. When I met my wife a few years back, she was working with the Libertarian Party at the time. And in fact, I asked her out on a date and she wasn't available because she was going to the fair. So I guess that was about 12 or 13 years ago now. She was going to the fair to work at the Libertarian Party table at the state fair in North Carolina. So, but I've evolved very much to believe in very fundamental libertarian principles. I don't necessarily agree with everything that the Libertarian Party has in its platform, but the fundamentals around government leaving me alone and about letting people to decide what they want for their own lives, who they can marry, what they do with their health care, where they go to the store, and where they send their kids to school, I think are all decisions we can make. I don't need the three of you making that decision for me, and I don't need to make the decision for all of you. I'm grown up. I can make decisions. And I really believe that a lot of the time when people become dependent upon other organizations for decisions or assistance, then they lose their ability or their drive to do that for themselves. And it probably is a negative outcome for the world for those kind of effects to occur. So I think that we just need to continue to push these values. I really believe that the free markets, as they don't really quite exist today, of course, but the free market philosophies have pulled billions of people on the planet out of poverty. And to think that today, maybe both the major parties don't realize what they're walking away from, and we run the risk of losing that all the time. There was a comment made about the deficits from Brad, and there are lots of people that have different opinions of what the deficits are doing and what happens. And it's interesting that we worry about whether or not we can fund our federal government in the long run, the way it's going. But the fact is that the long-term T-bills have less and less yield year over year since the 1980s. So the deficit hasn't actually affected our ability to fund our federal budget. It just it's fascinating how that's occurred. People in the world still want to buy our T-bills, which keeps the yield rates down. So that tells us that we don't really have a deficit problem that we all sometimes think we do. But we can look around the country and see that we have a different problem, and that's the mallocation of the assets and resources that have caused all the poverty we see now in all the big cities. And the fact that there's frictional loss of the government putting the money in the wrong place, plus sucking it up to pay their own people. But I think locally in North Carolina, the hot topics I'm interested in are things like school choice. I think it's important that it baffles me that the Democratic Party in this case argues that a woman should have the right to choose whether to have a child, but they'll turn around then and argue she doesn't have the right to choose what school that child goes to. And I really believe the government should be principle-based so that we can predict what our elected officials will decide in a situation that we haven't learned about yet. And if you know what the principles are, then you can expect some consistent behavior. If they're just deciding what they want to do based on a whim of their own opinion, then that's problematic. And so whether I personally favor one issue or another, I try to work based on the principles of less government intervention and more personal decisions and personal accountability. This idea around, for instance, affordable housing, I think is kind of a funny misnomer, because if things aren't affordable, then they wouldn't be the price they are, because they're being sold. Housing is affordable in Raleigh. It's just not affordable for those who cannot afford it. And I believe that the government policies have driven that problem as well. With artificially low interest rates, it's driven up the cost of houses. With the zoning laws in Raleigh that prevent people from having multi-unit homes built on properties, or at least reduce the incentive to do so. And I think there's a lot that can be done in areas like that. I'm a small businessman. My biggest fear as a small businessman is running into trouble with the government. I have no problem finding clients. I have no trouble growing my business. The environment here is great for that. But I worry all the time about did I put the right expenses in the right category, and did I pay my income taxes correctly? And I think if we didn't have the income taxes, I wouldn't have to worry about that. And I think we can survive just fine without income taxes. I'm a big fan of displace them entirely with consumption taxes of some sort. And I think we can run the government from that. I'm a fan of something called The Fair Tax, which is a book you can find. It was written a few years back by Neil Ports and a member of the House of Representatives. Forget the other author. But he talks about how we could develop a consumption tax to simply displace all the other taxes that we have. And it makes sense, and it can be fair and charitable to those who cannot afford to pay any taxes. So I think there's just a lot of room for improvements of this nature. And I think that we'd love to have an opportunity to have more influence on it. I think the reason that I'm running for office, I just checked the numbers. My competitor got 60% of the vote last time, running against a Republican and a Libertarian. And so clearly the district is gerrymandered Democrat. And so the chances of me having a victory are extremely small. But I think that it's worth having a voice and trying to speak about these issues and try to escalate what we can to try to influence the outcomes or influence the policies as best we can.
Excellent. Travis, what's some of your personal experiences that help shape some of your views?
Love those stories. I grew up, I guess I was a Republican, kind of grew up in a Republican family, kind of a conservative type family, went to Christian schools growing up and whatnot. But I'll be honest, I never, I never really bought into the Republican ideals, but I had never heard of the Libertarian Party either. I was always kind of one to buck the system a little bit and question things, question why things are, and some things didn't make sense. But again, it's one of the reasons why I'm big on messaging, is because I had never heard of the Libertarian Party. It's been around since 1971, and I had never heard of it. And I'm like, so that's something I'm passionate about, is getting proper messaging out, because it happened to me. I didn't quite fit into the Republican box, and I didn't quite fit into the Democrat box at all. And so I started finding, certain nuggets that certain people were saying. And one person comes into mind, and believe it or not, is Rand Paul. Just because he was an elected official, and some of the stuff he was talking about was like, this guy's kind of challenging the system a little bit. And it was Rand that kind of led me to discover Ron Paul. It's so funny how that guy has been instrumental in bringing so many people to the party, but it happened to me as well. And then when I was listening to Ron speak, I was like, what the heck's going on? And I was in the middle of moving from Atlanta to North Carolina. And so when I moved here, I re-registered as a voter from Republican to Libertarian. That's when I kind of discovered the Libertarian Party, was when I had to register to vote here in North Carolina. I was like, I know I'm not a Republican, I'm not a Democrat. And so I started looking around, like, what's going on in Raleigh, Wake County, for the Libertarian Party. So I found I believe it was either the LPNC site or maybe it was the Wake LP site. And I reached out, and it was funny. It was kind of like, what are you most interested in doing? And I was just kind of joking. I put run for office and run for president of the United States, just kind of messing around. Well, sure enough, I get a call from Brad Hessel, who's on this call, and I get a call also from Dave Ulmer. So both of them ended up calling me going, hey, what's going on? We saw you signed up to volunteer and you're interested in volunteering and even running for office and stuff like that. And I was like, oh yeah, whatever. I was just trying to figure out what's going on. So they both had invited me out to a meetup. It was somewhere downtown Raleigh. I think it was Oak and Dagger at that time. We showed up to Oak and Dagger, and I felt like it was a political family. It was a political home for me. Everybody's kind of a little bit rough around the edges. They're not polished, nobody's wearing a suit and tie. And I was like, you know what? I kind of fit in here, and so one thing led to another. Dave Ulmer, after getting to know Dave and Brad and a bunch of other people, he said, hey man, let's meet up for lunch. So we went over to Abbey Road in Cary, and that's when he asked if I'd be interested in running for office. This was in 2017. And I was like, oh man, I don't know if I'm qualified, blah, blah, blah. Like, I'm covered in tattoos. Like, what are people going to think? I'm a little rough around the edges. And he's like, no, man, you'll be great, blah, blah, blah. So I agreed to it. And so my first time running for office was in 2018. I ran for House District 11 against Allison Dahl. And what a great experience that was. Ended up kind of becoming friends with Allison. She won the election. And so that's when I, kind of jumped in, got very involved with volunteering, outreach events, food banks, whatever I could do just to help the cause and help people and just help in general, just make the world a better place voluntarily, by my consent. I was doing it. And then the opportunity came about to run for vice chair. So I ran for vice chair and I got elected. So I was vice chair under Dave Ulmer for 2 years. And during that 2 years, I was also chair of the LPNC convention committee. So I was putting together the convention. I was running for office. I was vice chair, and I got really, really involved really, really quickly. And then Dave ran for another term. And then it came about where Dave was going to hang it up. And so I ran for chair, and I got elected for chair of Wake LP. So here I am, like a couple years later, not even knowing about the party, to chairing the largest and most active affiliate in the entire state, Wake LP. So jumped in, got very involved with just volunteering and setting events up, guest speakers. Come to find out, I ended up inviting Allison Dahl to come speak on her medical marijuana bill, the same candidate I ran against first term, and she gladly accepted and came talk to us about the bill that she co-sponsored. And just stuff like that kept happening, just having good, solid relationships with people who are elected. I've never run an attack campaign, kind of a one side or the other attack campaign, because I don't believe that the way Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton and Kamala Harris are doing it right now is the way forward. It's just bashing each other like kindergartners and making fun of each other. I just don't believe that that's the way forward. And that's really why I was disgusted with both parties, was really during that Hillary Clinton and Trump campaign in the 2015. But anyway, Ran for another term as chair of Wake LP and ran for office again. I ran for town council of Holly Springs, where I live right now, and it was a really good campaign. I was very proud of that campaign. I would have probably have done nothing differently, but it's amazing how a nonpartisan race gets extremely partisan. And people, believe me, they look up your voter registration, and that was probably more partisan than any race I've seen was a nonpartisan race, which is amazing. But that campaign actually helped me kind of refine what it means to run a solid campaign and a consistent campaign that where everything looks good. You've got good graphics, you've got good messaging, you've got good logos, you've got a consistent theme throughout your entire campaign, and that's what you jump from. You have a good foundation. And so now, I believe that, just seeing an effective model of a campaign, an effective model of a good affiliate, a strong affiliate, now I'm able to kind of take that knowledge and help other people to run a halfway effective campaign or a halfway effective local affiliate. Because what we've done in Wake County is impressive. We've run more candidates than anywhere else in the country right here in Wake County. I mean, there's not another affiliate in the entire country that has anything on Wake LP. And, it started before I got involved, but it's finishing very, very strong. And Brad Hessel is a huge part of this, by the way. And I was able to vote for 9 libertarians on my ballot. I've never been able to do that in my life. There were 9 libertarians on my ballot. And to me, that makes a difference. We have 5 two-way races in Wake County. Ed George is in one of them. And I believe that we're going to have some really nice numbers as we keep growing and keep doing what we're doing. So thanks again for having me.
Oh, absolutely. Let's get into some of our top priorities. I know Ed's kind of talked about some of his, but we'll circle back and have him dive a little deeper. But Brad, why don't you tell us what your top priorities are for your campaign?
Sure. Although I feel the need to respond to Travis's comment about suit and tie. I normally don't go around in a suit and tie, but I was canvassing today, right, from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. And so and then I had to pick up signs at several early voting sites that are not going to be used on Tuesday. And then I had lunch and dinner. So I just haven't had a chance to change. So this is what I was wearing, right? So
that's impressive. No, I guess
right.
What I meant was it didn't feel stuffy.
Yeah. Well, I don't feel stuffy. So that's
yeah.
cool. So, well, like I mentioned, and this is kind of also responding to another thing that Travis said. I have 2 opponents. I have a Republican opponent and a Democratic opponent, and I don't have anything bad to say about either one of those folks. I mean, my Republican opponent, she learned I was running for the same office that she's running for, and she reached out and she offered me the use of her family's bar to have my campaign launch party. I mean, that's nice, right? And my Democratic opponent, the first piece of mailing I got from him, he sent me basically an offer in writing to be my personal senator, right? I mean, I could stop campaigning and not spend any money on yard signs, and he would get elected and enact all my great ideas. No work for me. I mean, this is pretty tempting, right? But then the wife, she pointed out this offer, it went to 10,000 other voters in Wake County also. So maybe not such a great idea. So, all 3 of us have ideas for improving healthcare, education, and the economy. These are things that North Carolina voters care about. And obviously my ideas are the best. But in this campaign, I haven't really been talking about those too much. I've been focusing on a topic that my opponents are not talking about. And again, this goes back to something Travis said. we just have such a horrible, toxic political climate right now, right? I mean, we got candidates who are spending all their energy attacking each other rather than talking about issues and policies, and we have candidates that are attacking their opponent's supporters in some cases. I mean, it's beyond the pale, okay? And I know this is not a North Carolina thing per se. It's something that's national. I know we can't resolve it just in North Carolina, but I do think there's some things we can do here in North Carolina that would significantly improve our lot right here in our state. And these are all electoral reforms. So I'm just going to talk about one of them, which is implementing ranked choice voting. Okay, so currently in North Carolina, we have plurality voting. So, you go into the booth and you fill out an oval next to the candidate that you like the best. You only get one choice. And the vote counters, they count up all the filled out ovals, and whoever gets more filled out ovals, they win the race. And you don't even need a majority, right? I mean, in 2020, we had, I believe it was 4 candidates on the ballot for president, and the winner of that race did not get a majority of the votes. Didn't need a majority, just needed to have more filled out ovals than anybody else, which is how it worked. So ranked choice voting is a little bit different. You don't have ovals to fill out, which is really a good thing for me because I'm really bad at keeping within the lines. I've never been able to do that very well. So instead, you have numbers, right? And you rank all of the candidates in each race, 1, 2, 3, and so on, however many there are. You don't actually have to rank them all. You can just rank some of them. You can just rank one of them, which would be your first choice by default, of course. And then the vote counters, they count up the number of first place votes. And, if it's a two-way race, it's not going to make any difference. Ranked choice voting, plurality voting, it's going to be the same result, whoever gets more votes. But if you have 3 candidates or more, and this year in North Carolina, we have 6 candidates running for president. It's an all-time record, by the way. It could make a difference, right? So, like I said, they count up all the first place votes, and let's take the 6-person race as a hypothetical example. If no one gets a majority of first place votes in the first round, what happens is that the last place finisher in our hypothetical case, that would be the 6th place finisher, is eliminated. And the vote counters look at all those ballots. And if the voter picked a second choice, like I said, you don't have to pick a second choice, but most voters would at least pick a second choice. Then all those votes for that eliminated candidate are redistributed to one of the other 5 remaining candidates, right? Now they all have more votes. Does somebody have a majority of first place votes? If not, then they eliminate the new last place finisher, in this case, the 5th place finisher, and they redistribute those votes, and they keep going until somebody gets a majority, right? So why do I like this? I like this because it encourages or incentivizes the candidates to reach out beyond their base, right? If I have, 35, 40% of all the people I know are going to vote for me no matter what I do, if I'm in a plurality situation with, more than one opponent, maybe I just throw those folks red meat and I don't worry too much about anybody else. And, I'll get some undecided votes, and hopefully, probably, I have a better chance of anybody else, really, of getting more votes than anybody else. And that's all I need. I don't need a majority. I just need more votes than all the other candidates. We know this strategy works. It worked in North Carolina in 2020, right? But if it's a ranked choice voting situation, okay, 35 to 40% that I know I'm going to get first place, those are great. But I got to be, thinking, how can I get another 10% plus one voter to pick me? Because I need a majority. 40% isn't going to do it, right? So I don't need them, those 10%, I don't need them to pick me first. They can pick me second or third. I have 40% in my pocket. I know I'm not going to be one of the candidates that's eliminated early. I'm going to be around for a while, right? So if there are those votes out there when other candidates are eliminated, I will pick up those votes and most likely I'll win. But if I stick to my original strategy and I just talk to my 40% and I ignore everybody else, or worse still, I insult all the other voters, it's probably not going to turn out so well for me. So, this gives, like I said, an incentive for candidates. It doesn't force candidates to reach out, but it does give them an incentive to be more moderate and more inclusive, which I think would definitely help this toxic political climate that we are involved in. And the other thing about it, of course, is that you need a majority to win, right? In North Carolina, there are many that 2020 example, that's really not a bad example. The guy that won, Donald Trump, he was close to 50%. If there had been a second round, he probably would have won anyway. But we have plenty of horrible examples. Our primary systems, for example, in the primary, you need 30% plus one to win, right? So if there's multiple candidates running in a primary, it's quite possible to win with, like, in the low 30s. We have plenty of candidates on the ballot now who won their primaries, even though like 65% of all the voters or 68% of all the voters voted against them. How is that democratic, right? Again, ranked choice voting would eliminate that. It would make sure that every winner got a majority. Basically, that's one of three ideas that I have. The other two are I would like to see a nonpartisan commission to redraw the lines, and I also think we need more better fairness for independents. I have time. I'll talk about those things later.
Yeah, those are all great points. Ed, you want to highlight what your priorities are again?
Sure. So I've talked about school choice. I think that the school system is the place where we all should be learning about the government, about how the government should work, and about the Constitution, and about the founders of the Constitution, and about things like when those who authored the Constitution walked out of the room. If you would have said, "Great, we have a democracy," they would have shot you, because democracy is not what they intended. They intended representative republic and a different structure than what we tend to think about that we have today. Democracy is when 50% plus one tells the other 49 and whatever percent remaining what to do. And as Barack Obama said, elections have consequences, and we've turned it into an us and them kind of approach by talking about democracy all the time. Back 100 years ago, a little more now maybe, when the amendment was passed that said that required senators to be elected by popular vote instead of by the state governments, is a big step in the wrong direction. It took us toward democracy and away from the representative republic that Benjamin Franklin was so proud of. And I think that there are too many people in the school system, have been through the public school system, that have never heard anything about what I just said. And the problem with the school system today is that it, as has been stated by, maybe it was Ron Paul, who said the problem with the school system today is it promotes self-esteem, but not self-esteem based on merit. Actually, it was Thomas Sowell who said that. And so I think that the school system needs competition. And every student is, it costs about $12,000 per student today to educate in our public education system. And I think that $12,000 should follow the student wherever that student wants to go to school. And those who claim that takes money away from the system, of course it does. It also takes the burden of the student away from the system. If you took all the students away, you wouldn't need the system. Therefore, it only makes sense that the money goes with the student. When I go to Lowe's instead of Home Depot, I take money away from Home Depot, but I take it to Lowe's, right? And in every part of life, we think that competition is good. We hate monopolies. We scream about how bad monopolies can be until we go to government. And we say, well, gee, the government monopolies work great, and they're a good thing, but they're not a good thing. And I don't know what the public school system, well, I do know what the public school system is afraid of. They're afraid of competition. And if we had a competitive environment where you could decide where to send your school, where we had salaries based on merit, not based on longevity in the system, there are all sorts of things that are wrong with the system today that could be solved with a good competitive environment. I spent my entire life working in competitive businesses, trying to make a profit. The last 10 or 11 years, primarily working as an independent businessman and assuring I can make a profit and competing effectively against my competitors by providing a quality product at a reasonable price, and living by the mantra that if I'm going to make a deal with somebody, I should make the deal I'd make if I was on the other side of the deal. And if I was fair and professional, that's how I would function. And I try to function that way. And the philosophy that John Mackey who was a co-founder of Whole Foods would say, and that is win, win, win. If I win, nobody else has to lose. We can all win together. And that can be my competitors. It can be my customers, because there's plenty of business out there for all of us if we behave properly and we don't have the government intervening and dislocating the wealth and the opportunities that may exist otherwise. So I think the school system would benefit greatly. It would be win-win for the school system. It would get better if it had competition. Maybe over a long period of time, it may even disappear. But I'm not in favor of eliminating it right away. I'm in favor of seeing how it can survive in a competitive environment. So that's a really, really big topic for me. I mentioned the small business issues regarding primarily licensure and control. There are too many things, basically a government license or a permit for what we do for a living can be best defined by this example. I have a skill and I want to use that skill and I want to sell my services to Travis. So the government says, you're not allowed to use your skill to sell services to Travis unless you have our permission. So you need to pay us for a permit, and then we'll allow you to sell your skills to Travis. Well, maybe Travis wants me to cut his hair or do something else for him, right? And if you think about all the people in the world who can do things like cut hair, braid hair, do nails, there's all sorts of services, mow lawns. I have a stepson that runs a landscaping business. He has to worry about permitting, about staying within the guidelines. And he basically has a lawnmower and a couple of laborers, and they mow lawns and build landscaping, build hardscapes. Why should he be under government control for that? So there's a lot of area where we can try to avoid government control, and I think that we should look closely at that. So those are really kind of two really hot topics for me. I'll add a third one. I had an emergency situation for myself. It turned out not to be anything at all, just a little bit of a scare. But because the situation I was in when it occurred, I agreed to ride an ambulance to the hospital. So I hop in the ambulance and go to the hospital. And I can't go to the nearest hospital because there's a long line and they're not taking any more patients at the emergency room. So I said, okay, I'm going to go to the hospital nearest my house. Well, they headed that way. Then they got a call and said, no, that hospital has a 3-hour wait. They're not taking anybody else. We have to go to a different hospital. So I ride to a third hospital location. I get there. They take me in, they do a blood test, they do an EKG, and they put me in a waiting room. 6.5 or 7 hours later, they call me back in, talk with me a little bit, and say the blood tests look okay, you can go home. All right, I have pretty good health insurance. I have pretty good small business health insurance. About a month later, I got a bill for $6,200 for that experience. It doesn't make any sense that I had to go to the third choice that I had to get a service applied to me for myself, and that I had to wait 7 or 8 hours to get it, and then I had to pay so much money for obviously what didn't cost that much money to do. There's no reason for it to cost that much money. So this is all driven by the certificates of need. The state government is influenced too heavily by the medical industry that wants a monopoly. Once again, a monopoly on their services. They don't want competition. So they require businesses to have a certificate of need if they want to buy medical equipment of certain types or supply medical services of certain types. I have a couple of friends who were doctors, and as the rules got tighter and tighter, they gave up their family practices because they couldn't compete anymore, because either they couldn't get the equipment they wanted to have because they couldn't get a certificate of need, or to stay in business they were required to merge with somebody who did, which then cut into their ability to run their own business. And they didn't want to work for somebody else. They wanted to run their own business. So they quit being doctors. So it's crazy. So the government policies reduce the available number of healthcare providers. They constrain where you can get services done. And of course, because the government's involved, it drives up the cost. We all know that everything the government gets involved in, almost everything anyway, let's say, I can't think of an example that this doesn't apply, costs more over time. The government drives the price of all services and goods up that they get involved with, whether that's the school system, the medical system, whatever it may be. And we can see plenty of examples of that, because I'm talking to you on a computer today that I think I paid maybe around $1,200 for, and it's really nice. It's a really nice computer, bought just a couple of months ago. When I moved to North Carolina in 1997, I bought a Gateway computer desktop for my desk. The computer, a couple of speakers, and a nice monitor cost me $3,200. Computers have gotten cheaper by that much, and of course they're way better today than they were then. It's just an example. Televisions are much cheaper and much better. The things that government have not figured out how to interfere with aggressively have gotten cheaper, because competition is good. It provides a better quality product at a cheaper price. And there's no reason to believe that that principle wouldn't apply to everything else that government does for us today, or tries to do for us today. So that is medical care, that is education, or any other service is much better provided by private industry that can find ways to compete, improve the quality of product to try to gain customer base, and also therefore through that competitive process, in the end, reduce the prices. If computers and TVs cost, prices of those went up the way the cost of medical care has over the last 27 years, we probably wouldn't be able to afford to have this conference call right now, because it would be just too far out of reach and too expensive for us to try to participate as openly as we do. But today we can do it basically for free. It's amazing, right? We've cut these costs down to just having an advertiser involved in the process that covers the cost for us. So those are my items. Appreciate the opportunity to be able to talk about them. I'll comment on Brad's ranked choice voting, which I'd never heard of until I met Brad, and I absolutely love it. I think it is fantastic. I think it's exactly what we should be doing in every election for every office. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Travis, what are your top 3 priorities?
Well, first, I want to disagree with Ed on one thing. The government actually is good at one thing. It knows
I look forward to hearing that.
Yeah, I'm telling you, it knows how to break your legs and then hand you a crutch and say, see, if it weren't for the government, you wouldn't be able to walk. So they are good at one thing.
All right, that's Travis 1, Ed 0 on that topic then. Okay, I'll take that.
That was a quote from Harry Brown. I can't claim that one, but it's very accurate. And you guys took the wind out of my sails, because I'm really like on board with everything you said. But there's another topic that I believe that we need to address, and that's criminal justice reform. It is completely out of whack. Laws create criminals to pick on certain types of people so they could throw them in jail and keep their power. And because the government has no rights to tell you what you can consume, what you can drink, what you can eat, who you can love and who you can marry, these fake laws need to be abolished. And you should be able to grow a plant, as many as you want, in your backyard, no matter what the plant is, and have a garden and be able to garden and sell your plants to whoever you want to, whether it's tomatoes or cucumbers or marijuana or poppy seeds or whatever it is, whatever comes out of the ground, you should be able to cultivate and grow and sell and consume and make money as you see fit. And we need to kick the FDA out of it and the DEA out of it, because they have no business telling us what we can grow on our property. And if we have a willing buyer by consent that wants to purchase a cucumber from you, that should be completely allowed. And so our criminal justice reform is throwing people in jail for nonviolent crimes and for victimless crimes, and for crimes that aren't really crimes. They just made it up in a cubicle because they want to pick on certain types of people or certain demographics, or whoever they want to pick on. They can pick and choose. So this is a big one. We need to look at the bail bond system and completely abolish the bail bond system, because it's a cash cow for attorneys. It's a cash cow for the court system. I'm sure there's a few people on here that will understand how it's a cash cow and how they just absolutely trample over your rights, throw you in jail before they even know if you're innocent or you're guilty. And unfortunately, it's become backwards. We're guilty before we're proven innocent, which should be the other way around. So if we, the people, don't stand up and for our rights and abolish some of these fake laws that are made up by these politicians in their cubicles in their offices, it's going to keep getting worse. And so criminal justice reform is a big one. They have no right to tell you how many barrels of beer you can brew in your business. There should not be a cap on how many barrels you're allowed to sell and self-distribute. And they have no right how much cocaine you're allowed to sell someone. I mean, it goes down to literally how the free market should operate, which they're interfering in. And so criminal justice is a big deal. And also, Ed hit on this one a little bit, is income taxes. I'd like to push for a vote to abolish income taxes in North Carolina. I believe it would absolutely boost our economy immediately. And we lower business taxes to an absolute minimum, which is 0. And so when we get rid of income taxes and you can keep the blood, sweat, and tears, hard-earned work and the hard-earned money that you earned, and then you can donate to whoever, whatever cause you want to, because you earned it and it's not stolen from, I believe we will thrive. And so I'd like to see income taxes go away to 0. Other states do it just fine, and replace it with no other taxes, and free up North Carolinians from being gouged and stolen from, and literally taken from when they didn't do the work. So another thing that I believe is going on is the mismanagement of tax money. Instead of it going to build up, and militarize police departments, it could be going towards community gardens and trails. We wouldn't have a bond. You have to vote for a bond every 2 years. And, if we could cut spending and also allocate it to community type of situations to give kids something to do, whether it's basketball courts or trails or something to keep them occupied, because they're committing crimes because they're bored. They don't have anything to do. So we give them something to do. I believe it will help. It will help community morale. It will boost morale, and especially when we're not stolen from and they're not gouging us. So those are a couple things. I agree with the school choice. I agree with ranked choice voting. Ranked choice voting is actually one of my top issues. I completely agree. But I'd like to see people be able to grow and sell vegetables and plants from their own property without the fear of being invaded by the government. So this is a big one. They have no right to step on your property, to be honest. So if they don't have a warrant, then you should be able to grow whatever you want to. So this is a big deal. Like criminal justice reform, we should not be getting thrown in jail for fake crimes. So I'll stop talking.
Hey, I could easily pile on another hour on criminal justice reform. And for a guy
Can you really?
For the manufacturing and distribution of marijuana, the only way I got off was because of the 2018 Farm Bill and the hemp laws. We can easily dive into there, but we're at the top of the hour. So Brad, why don't you give us some closing statements and tell people where they can learn more about you?
Sure. My website is electbradhessel.org, and I've got all kinds of information about my my electoral reform ideas, as well as my ideas for healthcare, education, and the economy, and some other stuff's on there as well. So check that out and go crazy.
Sounds great. Ed, what's your thoughts?
I also have a webpage with the Libertarian Party, but I have my own webpage as well. It's edgeorgefornc.com, and I've outlined 4 or 5 of these topics that I've been talking about today. And I'm really excited about seeing the outcome of the election as it goes. It's been a great learning curve for me. Brad and David Ulmer talked to me some about this opportunity to be running for office, and that although it was an uphill battle, the opportunities to learn about how the process works and get more engaged. And I'm really excited about the outcome of this election, and looking very much forward to the next one and what we can do together to try to create change moving forward. So thanks a lot.
Oh, absolutely. Travis, what about you?
You can find me on the interwebs at Travis Groo 4NC.org. And the 4 is actually spelled out FOR. So Travis Groo 4NC.org. And my basic platform is there. It's pretty simple. Leave people alone, let people live their lives their way. But I would like to invite everyone out to this coming Tuesday. We're having an election night party at Tobacco Road, downtown Raleigh, where we're going to gather and watch the numbers come in and celebrate our successes, big and small. And so please come out. And if you're interested in getting involved with Wake LP in any kind of capacity, see one of us on this screen and reach out, because we are growing, we are moving, and we're not stopping. And we're going to keep voting gold. Even if it's a protest vote, we're going to keep voting our way. And anybody that tries to tell you you're wasting your vote, tell them they're insulting the voters. They're not insulting us. They're insulting the voters, which is not okay. So anyhow, thank you again. And it's Travis Groo 4NC.org. And I super appreciate this. I appreciate your time. And I agree with you, Ed, George. We need to abolish con laws immediately, because it is really, really, really hurting people. They are hurting people more than it's helping. So thank you again.
Absolutely. And I'll definitely be seeing you Tuesday night. I'll make the trek out there to Tobacco Road. Right now I'm in Charlotte. I'm going to be watching the Saints-Panthers game tomorrow, wearing a Saints jersey on the Panther side. So I'm really going to be testing the waters, but it will be an experience. But with that, we're going to go ahead and shut it down. Larry, you can go ahead and kill us. Thanks, everyone, for taking the time to pay attention to our candidate's message. And we hope that you join us back, I think, tomorrow night, when we have 4 new, fresh faces ready for you to talk to.